Stella's Meza. On today's episode, I will show you how to make a classical American dessert. Today we're making pineapple upside down cake. This is a recipe that can be eaten all year round. The cake is delicious, moist, and not too sweet. And of course, it has the star ingredients, which is pineapples and maraschino cherries. So to get started, I'll take you down to ingredients. Let's see what we have. Right, now to prepare this recipe, you will need the following things. I have here some all-purpose flour. I have here some baking powder. I have here some white granulated sugar. I have here a pinch of salt, and I use kosher salt when I cook. And that's for the dry ingredients that goes into the cake batter. Now for the wet ingredients, we have some eggs. We have some pure vanilla extract, and you want the real thing. You want it to taste as good as it can. And we have some room temperature butter. I have here some pure pineapple juice. And to garnish, we will need a stick of butter, and I put that in a 9x13 baking sheet pan. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that. And over here I have some brown sugar, lightly tightly packed. And then we have some maraschino cherries. And we have some pineapple rings, okay? Now, like I mentioned, you'll need to bake this in a 9x13, well, this is what I'm using, 9x13 baking sheet pan. You can also use two 9-inch round baking pans, okay? And you also need a spatula for your batter. You'll need some measuring spoons. And the kind of pineapple I use are these canned pineapples. I find that those are sweetest. The flavor is just right, and the juice inside here is pure pineapple juice, so that's what I'm using. Now you'll need to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's what I have happening over there. And then to your pan, what I did, I greased the sides of the pan with just some butter, and in the pan itself I have a stick of butter that's been sitting at room temperature, and to that I'm going to add the brown sugar that we have set aside. Now remember, please, for any of my videos, the full ingredient list and the measurements can be found on my blog. That's www.stellasmeza.blogspot.com. Right now I'm just showing you how it's done, but if you want the full ingredient list and the measurements, please check out my blog. So I put the brown sugar and the butter in the baking pan that we're going to use to bake the cake, and I'm going to put this in the preheated oven that's at 350 degrees. I'm just going to sit in the center rack, and we're going to let that melt. While we let that melt, we're going to work on mixing our ingredients for the batter. Okay, so I'm going to put that in the oven. Okay, now I have here a stand mixer, okay, and you can see the bowl in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creaming the butter. Now this butter is soft. It's been sitting at room temperature, so it's nice and soft, and you want to do that to make it easier to cream the butter in your mixer. You can also use a hand mixer if you have one. Okay, and I'm just gonna turn it down, excuse me, and I'm gonna beat it on low, 1, 2 or 3. It's already soft, so it's not gonna take long, and you want to beat it till it's nice and creamy. And I'm using the flat attachment on the stand mixer. Okay, now to that I'm going to add the sugar. I'm going to add a little at a time so it's nice and creamy. I'm going to zoom in so you get some of that action. Bear with me, I'm working this by myself today, so I'm going to keep adding that sugar till it's all in there, just a little at a time, like in 3 parts. You want the butter and the sugar to be nice and fluffy. And I have added the remainder of the sugar. Alright, I'm going to stop the mixer. I'm going to stop it and scrape the sides of the bowl. Just to make sure everything is nicely combined. And then I'm going to turn it again on low. And then after that we're going to start adding the eggs. Now I cracked my eggs. It's 4 eggs I'm using. I cracked them in a bowl. You want to do it one at a time in a bowl, just so that if one is bad, it does not ruin the whole batch. So I made sure every one of the eggs is good. I'm going to put them in the batter one at a time. So I'm going to restart this. And I'm going to keep creaming. And I'm going to use some, I'm going to add some vanilla extract into the eggs. So we're going to add 2 teaspoonfuls of pure vanilla extract. I'm going to move this out the way. And I'm going to start slowly putting in the eggs, one at a time. And as this happens, I'm going to scrape the sides of the pan to make sure everything is nice and combined. Might as well add the rest of it. You see that? That's nice and creamy. Alright, now while that beats, I'm going to add, I have here some all-purpose flour. I'm going to add in there some baking powder, okay, and that pinch of salt that I set aside. I'm going to put that into the flour. Now we're getting ready to put the dry ingredients into the batter, and I'm just going to mix with a whisk to make sure that baking powder gets to all that flour and the salt also gets in there. It's all combined. Have it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding the flour and the pineapple juice that I have set aside, okay? So I'm going to do this in 3 parts. I'm going to add the flour, a third of the flour, and then half of the pineapple juice, a second third pineapple juice, and then the last part of the flour, okay? So I'm going to start adding a little, make sure you do it a little at a time and slowly, otherwise it's going to be a cloud of dust forming, and you do not want that. You want to avoid that. Try not to add it all at once. So I'm just going to do a third. And then to that I'm going to add some of that pineapple juice. Half of it. And let it mix a little. Add a little bit more of that flour. But I'm going to keep mixing this up, and then I'll be right back with you to show you the finished batter. As you can see, the batter for the cake is nice and fluffy. And you don't want to over mix it. You want to mix it on low, and then just mix right until you see the flour has disappeared from the top of the batter as you whisk it. Then after that you can use your spatula to incorporate any flour that's on the sides of the bowl into the batter, like I've done here. So that's the consistency it needs to be. It's nice and thick. That's a thick batter for this cake, okay? So in the oven, I'm going to remove that stick of butter that we put in our baking pan, and brown sugar that we had in there with it. And I'm just going to take a spatula and mix that around together. That's a brown sugar and the stick of butter that we had. Just make sure everything's nicely mixed, because this is going to make the base of the cake, and this is what will caramelize beautifully. This and the pineapple juice that's going to come from the pineapple themselves, the actual pineapples, that's going to caramelize beautifully at the bottom of the pan and give it that nice flavor. And you want to kind of spread it out as evenly as you can. I know they're clumping together at this point, but try and mix it out as evenly as you can, just so that every corner gets some of that goodness. And it's going to level off as you bake it. So if you cannot get it exactly even, in an even layer, do not panic. It'll all come together as you bake it. Making sure you just want to make sure that all that brown sugar gets some butter on it. Okay? That's the most important part. Even more important than making it even, like in an even layer. That's the most important. No dry brown sugar in there. Okay, so now it looks the way I want it to look. I'm just going to flatten that lamp over there. Okay, so what you're going to do next is you're going to take your pineapple rings, okay, and you're going to arrange them over the brown sugar and butter combination. Okay, so I'm just going to try and get the edges too. Try and line them right next to each other so it fits. What I have here is a can of pineapple rings. You can use a can and a half, depends on how big your pan is or what your preference is. Okay, so it seems like I'm going to need another tin, and I have that in the fridge, but I'm going to finish that as soon as I show you what needs to be done next. Okay, so I'm going to take my other pineapples. I'm just going to put maybe 3 in here, but inside each pineapple round, what you're going to do is take a maraschino cherry, and this is what they look like. I drained it, and be very careful that juice that they're stored in, it stains. So I'm taking a maraschino cherry and putting it inside each pineapple round, like the center part of it. See what I'm doing? Okay, and I'll take a look at it and see if I want to add some in between the spaces. We'll see. But let me get my pineapple rounds, and then I'll finish this, and I'll come back and show you how we're going to pour the batter in there, and we're going to throw it in the oven. Okay, so we'll be right back with you. Alright, now we're done lining the bottom of our baking pan with the pineapple rings and the maraschino cherries, and now I'm ready to scoop the batter into the baking sheet. So you're just gonna use your spatula to gently layer it over. Now don't worry if it doesn't fall in a single layer as you do this, because you're going to go over it with your spatula. So just kind of smooth it over to make sure that every corner, every part of this is well covered. And the reason why I use pineapple juice as opposed to milk is because this is a pineapple cake, like the name suggests, and of course I want the batter to have that pineapple flavor in it as well, not just the pineapple slice at the bottom, but I want that flavor to be all throughout the cake. Try and get every bit of that out the pan. Okay, so now I'm just going to smooth the batter, and you want to do it gently so you don't disrupt the pattern that you formed at the bottom of the pan. Just kind of want to smooth it down. Make sure you get the corners and the edges. Evenly spread that batter around. Okay, and we're done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the oven for 35 to 40 minutes, and I'm going to check when there's 5 minutes left to the minimum time, to 35 minutes. I'm going to check. I'm going to use a toothpick to insert it in the middle of the cake, and if it comes out clean with no wetness on it, that means the cake is done. Another way to test your cake is to touch the top side of it, just kind of gently pat it. If it swings back, the cake should be done. And also another way to know is if it pulls away from the edges. But the surefire way, the best way to use to make sure that your cake is done, to test for doneness, is insert a toothpick in the middle of the pan and then check if it's wet, it's not done, leave it in there another 5 minutes, and then test it again near the center, next to not right where you tested the first time, next to that, and then if it comes out clean, it's good. So we're going to put this in the oven 35 to 40 minutes, okay? And we'll see you back when everything's nice and done, and then I'll let you know what we do next. See you in a little bit. Now my cake took exactly 35 minutes to bake. I inserted a chopstick in the center. That's what those two holes are if you take a closer look. And the stick came out clean. That means the cake is well, it's done. So what I'm going to do is, over here I have a 15 by 10 inch baking sheet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invert this up over the cake. I've been letting this cake sit down on a baking rack, on a cooling rack for 5 minutes. I'm going to sit this up over the baking pan, and then I'm gonna flip it over and let the cake sit for 5 minutes. That way it slowly releases into the baking sheet. The reason why I'm using the baking sheet is because I do not have a platter that's the same size or big enough to accommodate that pineapple upside down cake. So I'm going to just gently flip this over and then let it release, and I'll come back and show you the item once it's plated. Now, if for whatever reason your pineapples and maraschino cherries stick to the bottom of the pan, do not panic. Just once the cake is released onto your baking sheet, take a fork and place them gently back up over the cake, and it'll look fine. Nobody will be able to tell. So we're going to I'm going to flip this over. I'll take a few minutes, 5 minutes to be exact, just to let everything release from the baking pan, and then I'm going to come back and show you what the cake looks like once it's nice and plated. We'll see you back in a little bit. Now that right there is a close-up of the pineapple upside down cake. You can see the cherries in there, the pineapples, beautiful. Look at that. And all the caramelization from the sugar and the butter. So I went ahead and sliced off a piece, and I want to let you know that it released without sticking to the top of the pan. So that's what it looks like. I'm going to show you the plated square in a minute. Alright, like I promised you, I'm going to show you the plated pineapple upside down cake. I went ahead and took the corner piece, and if you can see that, you see the caramelization that's taken place from the butter and the sugar, and there's a pineapple piece and there's a cherry in the middle. And just for garnish, I went ahead and added the cherries and the pineapple, just so you know what it is you're eating. Okay, so I'm going to take a taste of it. It's still a little bit on the hot side, so I hope it doesn't burn. That has a cherry and some of that pineapple juice in it. I need to shut the front door. This is so good. Very, very moist. And that pineapple juice that we put in the batter comes through in it. You can taste it. Beautiful tasting cake. The edges, that's where it's at. Woo. Yeah, I'm going to enjoy this off camera. It might be a bit too much for you. So I thank you for joining me this time. I hope you stop by next time and join me again as I take your taste buds on another culinary safari. And remember, for the full ingredient list and the measurements, visit my blog. It's www.stellasmeza.blogspot.com. Thank you for joining me this time. Karibu.